Trump family keeps giving and giving. Donald Trump Jr. went on the Opie and Anthony Show back in 2013 and he started a conversation about women at all-male golf clubs, and it devolved into a discussion of sexual harassment and when people are allowed to draw the line and how Donald Trump Jr. feels about that. Take a listen.
You know, if you can't handle some of the basic stuff that's become a problem in the workforce today, like, you don't belong in the workforce.
Yeah.
Like, you should go, maybe teach kindergarten. I think it's a respectable, position. But, like,
and those little
you can't be negotiating billion-dollar deals if you can't handle, like, But listen, there's a place where you have to draw the line. But, like, today, this stuff that you get in trouble for, it's like, I wouldn't even think about, like.
So they continue, and Opie and Anthony try to demonstrate what it's like in their studio when they bring up naked pictures of people, and we join the conversation right then.
Officially. Listen, that's not bad. I mean, I see some,
But wouldn't it be funny if he showed tits and then Donald sued?
I feel harassed.
But Donald,
this is my get-rich-quick scheme. I'm now suing you guys because I feel uncomfortable. And by the way, that's what happens in the world. Like, I can play along, I can be fine, and then I can decide randomly, you now have crossed the line, even though I've been going with this. Is not.
How do we feel about the logic there?
Yeah. First of all, how'd they book Donald Trump Jr.? I mean,
that was in 2013.
What a great get. I mean, what's amazing is that we haven't had a female president before. I mean, Jesus, guys are ridiculous.
So, look, again, we're going to have a lot of guys in the country who are like, man, I remember that case where somebody said one wrong word and then they got sued for sexual harassment. Look, they love to blow up the extreme cases. And so the reality is, the reason we have sexual harassment laws is because it used to happen as a regular course of business. And women would try to come into the workforce and they say, yeah, sure, as long as you sleep with me. And some of that still exists, obviously. Roger Ailes is an enormous case of it. Guy who would regularly demand to sleep with a woman in order to give them a job, all the way back to the Merv Griffin show and all the way through Fox News. Just lost his job, lucky for him. He found something else to do, which is to be an advisor for Donald Trump. Okay, literally, it's amazing. And so these guys always look at it only from their perspective. What's the big deal, man? We used to we used to show, I think they said tits, right?
Yeah.
We used to show tits all the time, and we talk about it, and sometimes you hit on the girls. So apparently, if you can't handle that, you can't handle a billion-dollar business deal. So just to give you a sense of perspective, because apparently people have a really hard time thinking outside of their own perspective. Like they say, I want to be able to say tits at work. That's the only thing I can see, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now what if it was the shoes on the other foot? I'm not talking about women hitting on you. I'm talking about your boss is gay. And he thinks it's hilarious to show you pictures of cocks all the time, right? Mm-hmm. And he likes to put them in your face and go, look at this, it's a cock. This was my cock. Wait, you want to teach kindergarten? Go teach kindergarten. And then, Donald Trump Jr.'s dad apparently likes to grab genitalia without asking. And your boss comes around, come on, if you're going to do a business deal, here, let me just grab it, let me grab it. Oh, well, you can't do a business deal? Go teach kindergarten. Oh, when the shoe's on that foot, that's a little uncomfortable.
But of course, it's worse than that, because you're right. That would be, while funny, ridiculous, and nobody would stand for that. But those guys haven't been judged their entire lives because they're guys, haven't been already diminished 1,000 times, that would never rise to the level of harassment, right? Would never rise to the level of someone being punished at work for doing it. And they might be making less. And everybody asks them to go get coffee. And when they were in college, nobody, they maybe shouldn't even, there was a time when you wouldn't even have been presumed that you would go to college. You would just get married, go home. You shouldn't even be at work. You should, as he said, the worst part about this isn't anything except don't belong in the workplace. I mean, Donald Trump Jr. likes a world where unless you're one of the boys, you don't belong in the workplace.
Yeah, and how good are you at doing billion-dollar deals if you need to talk about tits in the middle? Like, what would make you better? If you could do a billion-dollar deal without being a total asshole. Like, what is it about that where you need to talk about it, where you need to bring that stuff up? That's not fair.
The locker room of billionaires.
Yeah, it's a great strategy. It's great work if you can get it. Like, it's a brilliant strategy on the part of people who are keeping other folks out of the business, keeping them from getting the opportunity. It's a really strong strategy. It's unfair and it's wrong.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Look, Brett's such a good point because I've done a lot of business deals. They weren't billion-dollar deals, but I've done a ton of contracts. The tits have never come up.
Yeah.
Not once, right? And we do a show, and we do it in the context of where a lot of issues come up. Racy stuff comes up, yada, yada. But in a business deal, I have never, even just guys in a room doing a business deal, nobody's like, oh, okay, you want to sign that contract on that media property, but how about tits? Right?
But I do think that there's a naivete to thinking that, I think that is progress, and the fact that it doesn't happen anymore, and we're as outraged by this. But I think in the sort of the Mad Men era of these deals, that went on all the time. I have to say, I don't have to confess, it wasn't me. I had an uncle who was very good friends with Donald Trump. And he was a wealthy guy, and Donald Trump was at his funeral. He was a successful guy, but he was a playboy, and he was a chauvinist, and he was a misogynist. And he would sit around and talk about it. He was as successful a businessman as I've ever personally known, and he would talk about this all the time. He was born in the 1920s, but as he got older, he would talk about that stuff all the time. It does not surprise me that this is part of Trump's vernacular, because it doesn't surprise me that he would have sat with my uncle and they would have talked about the same things. It is an era that is apparently not all gone, but at least there's outrage now, which I don't think would have existed. It's certainly not at this volume before.
It's part of Trump Jr.'s vernacular.
But it is.
More
well, but
surprising.
that's also the house that he grew up in, and
It's so sad. You just kind of want to save it. Be like, here, come over here. I'm going to tussle your hair, and I'm going to save you from yourself.
Yeah.
Right, but because there are some kids who would be like, Dad, Jesus, I love you, but knock it off. We don't do that anymore.
Right.
And I know one multi-millionaire. I don't know how much he's worth, but he's worth probably $100 million. But I think, and he's put together big deals before. That's what he does. He puts together deals, and I imagine if he were doing a deal, because he's a very straightforward guy, that if he were doing a deal with someone who in the middle of the meeting talked that way about his secretary or his assistant, he just wouldn't do the deal.
Yeah.
He'd be like, no, it's not the kind of guy I'm going to deal with. I'll do a deal with somebody else.
And you're closing out people who wouldn't do business with someone like that. Like when you
and that guy's a conservative too, by the way.
But there's something about a salesman's attitude where you identify the person you're selling to and you play to whatever their thoughts
there's
are.
that
So
too,
it's
for
like,
sure, yeah.
But even still, I know I talked to someone who's super duper wealthy, and he says during all this what drives him crazy is how bad Donald Trump is at business. And I always thought, like, oh, come on, he's a Trump, he's a big guy. This guy has a lot of money, and he says, listen, to fail in real estate is really difficult.
To fail in the casino business, there's people at this table that can't believe that anyone could fail at the casino business.
But he says...
the house always wins.
Right.
Except
one guy.
Right. One guy couldn't figure that out.
He says when you're picking companies, it's like to invest in, it's not too hard, but when it's real estate, every tax incentive is in your favor to fail as badly as Trump has.
But Brett, we knew that about Trump. We knew he was a failed businessman, and that was somehow forgiven. We did not know this ugly, tawdry, hideous side of him yet.
Because he was a celebrity. That's why we ignored the business side, because he was a freaking celebrity.
Because he's famous, and we love famous.
But he's the one who brought the discussion into talk in the vernacular. And his supporters very easily wrap their minds around the way he delivers stuff. And there are many arguments against Trump that take a sophisticated mind to understand, business-wise and whatever. The other edge of the Trump sword is that now everyone can, in juxtaposing Hillary scandals versus Trump scandals, it's way easier to wrap your mind around grab her in the pussy than it is to wrap your mind around, like, okay, so what information was shared in the lead up to the debate?
Right.
Together we can change the media, make it more representative of you and not the powerful. Come join us, make a difference. TYTnetwork.com/join.